Happy 155th birthday for Canada and happy 246th birthday for our friends down south. Happy Independence Day for you watching from down there. Otherwise, welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm going to be thanking you all for subscribing and liking and commenting on my videos. Today, I just realized I've surpassed the 10-year mark on my YouTube journey. Although I wasn't taking it as seriously back in the day, and I probably had about a 8-year hiatus, I still had some content that was in 2012. So I looked at a few of the videos and I loved what I did, and that was 10 years ago. So I'm going to post one of my favorite videos at the end of this so you guys can watch what I used to do, which the start of this channel is custom computing, which is basically modifications and custom computing design. So that's what I like to do on the channel, and that's what I do on this one as much as I possibly can. Moving forward, I just got my first sponsor, and I'm going to be receiving a review product for my network downstairs. So that's going to be really cool. I'm going to be able to review a switch and a patch panel, and I'm going to be setting up the whole house networking on it, and we'll do a whole thing on that. So that's really cool that I got a sponsorship, and it's all thanks to you guys. So thank you. Keep subscribing and asking for some more videos. I'm also going to be doing a comments contest. I used to do this back when I first started the channel just to kind of encourage more people to comment on my content, and you get a chance to win. In this case, it'll be risers or power supplies or something like that. And essentially, it just encourages me to build up a community of people messaging and commenting on my videos. So without further ado, here is one of the very first videos I posted on YouTube. I really hope you like it because I loved it. And you got to keep in mind it's 10 years ago. But thanks again. Happy birthday, Canada. Happy birthday, US. And I hope you guys stick around for the whole ride. We're getting bigger, and I'm loving every minute of it. Thanks, guys.
Hey guys, welcome back to customcomputing.ca. So here's an update. The contest winner. The contest winner is going to go to Glenn Wooten. Thank you so much for your comments. And you will be receiving a message from me, and I will ship out uh, this dual res from XSPC. Now, I originally said this was a brand new res. Unfortunately, I ended up using it, so it's not brand new, but it looks brand new. So it has been used once, so you know it works. As well, I will be sending you 10 1/2 inch ID fittings, barb fittings. They're used as well. You can decide to use them if you wish in a build or what have you. As well as I'm going to be sending this 120 millimeter fan insignia. Um, it's an acrylic panel that you can use to jazz up a computer of your wish. So, anyways, congratulations, Glenn, and I'll be contacting you and shipping this out within the next week or so. With that said, I have this glacier build that I'm going to be demonstrating. So it's going to be quite a long video. I'm going from start to finish with the entire build. So grab your popcorn and sit down for probably 35 to 40 minutes and watch my video if you wish. Thanks. Okay, so let's get started. This build is a client build, and one of the best things about the client that I've had so far is they've really let me use my own imagination and use kind of a build that I would like to see happen. The stipulations of this build are he wanted to use a GTX 780 and it needed to be quote unquote bling. So I've never done a white build. I've always wanted to do a white and blue build, but there was also a budget for this. So we took a look at all the white cases, and this thermal take case is only around 50 to 60 bucks, and it's a mid-sized tower case. Um, the interiors of it are all black, and I had an idea of taking everything out, drumming out the front drive cages and making a big window mod. At first, I thought there would be room at the top for a 240 rad, but this is not the case. It barely fits 140 millimeter fans. I do enjoy working with smaller cases. This allows me to optimize the space, and without those hard drive cages there, I was envisioning a either 240 rad or a 140 rad. The side panel of this is extremely ugly and useless. The first thing I was going to do is just cut it right out. He wanted to see a lot of the computer and the components, which is half of customizing it. So with this being beveled out, it was really easy to cut out a big portion of the window, and we were going to fasten a nice piece of acrylic onto it. The big window mod on most of my um, custom builds is pretty much, well, I make them as big as you can without hindering the rigidity of the side panel. This side panel already has a pretty weak base, as it's only a $60 case. So what I would have to do is make sure that the acrylic is a little bit thicker than what I used to use. And so right away, the first thing I did on this case was start to cut out the window. Now, with all my mods, everything is done by hand. I don't have any big equipment to do anything, so pretty much well everything is done with a hand Dremel. Um, Obviously, it's not as professional as it can be, but it also gives me pretty much well micromanagement of all the cuts and what have you. And after I sand it down, then it looks pretty straight if I can get it that way. This actually ends up being a major feature of the build. Um, I'm not too sure why Thermaltake had it the way it was, but I think I've improved it significantly, and you'll see that later on in the build. So as you can see here, I followed the outline of with a little bit of the bevel. You can tell that there's going to be the plastic is going to be inset, and so that allows me to use a thicker acrylic, which will also maintain its structure and rigidity of the side panel because it's already a pretty thin aluminum, but it's looking good so far. The next thing I wanted to do is cut out the drive bays. I wanted to see whether or not I could put a 240 rad in the front. I've done this with my reanimation build on two Antecs. And in fact, with the Antec Nano 1 900, um, also you could probably put a 360 in the front. That's how tall it is. Now this case is a lot smaller than that, and it turns out I was only able to put in a 140. So I decided to go with a thick 140 in push-pull config, and that is more than sufficient for just the CPU cooling, which is what we're going to be doing. Once I had the front drive cages out, it seriously opened up the case immensely. It really made the case a lot more functional. And I'm not too sure why every company feels as though they need to line half the case with 8 to 10 drive bays, when in reality you can just go ahead and buy, two 4 terabyte drives or what have you, and what else could you possibly need? This isn't a server case. Nobody's going to use this as a NAS case. So um, what we were planning on doing is just putting a SSD and the actual um, radiator in the front, and that should be fine. So as I was measuring, there was already provisions for a 140 millimeter fan at the front of the case. However, the current layout of it cut off quite a bit of the airflow to the 140 millimeter fan. As you can see, there's quite a bit of metal blocking on the fans. So you can see on the left hand and the right hand side there, I'm going to have to Dremel out just so the fan can actually breathe. And we're going to cut that piece right out. and be able to attach it so that there's no hindrance on the airflow in this case. So once I had that cut out, I could see exactly where the RAD was going to sit as well as the push-pull config, and there's more than enough room for there to be a push-pull config on this. These were the only two major mods that I ended up having to do for this case, which is quite new for me. I'm used to spending the majority of my time cutting and fabricating the entire case, but in this situation, the majority of the time was actually spent on painting. So after I did these two mods, it was pretty much well just paint and go. Now, one of the things I really enjoyed about this case is that it's very simple. It's small form factor, it's simple. The thing I really didn't like is how the interior is black, and that's really going to take away from the look. If you're going to have a white case, the interior being black really doesn't let the components shine off the back end, and it really actually makes it look a lot smaller. Because this is already a small case, I needed to open up the interior to make it perceive bigger than it actually is. And so for the first time ever, I actually dismantled the case. It was held together with rivets, and I dismantled the top and bottom parts of the case. I've never actually done this before, and I do have a rivet gun, so that I knew I can put it back together and pretty much well just get ready to the paint. So I could have gone all the way to taking every panel off, but I didn't feel the need to do that in this case. Um, After I got it up and hung it up against in my basement, I realized that I was able to, you know, paint pretty much well every nick and cranny that I needed to. This is after the first coat of white paint, and I was using a semi-gloss paint, and it's actually quite liquidy. Um, it went on pretty thick, and I ended up having to do four coats of paint and two coats of lacquer. Once I had it done with the painting, I was quite surprised at the amount of brightness that it brought to the table. It really changed the look of the case, and really, really impressed me with the vibrant white. Um, this isn't really doing it justice, but as well as you can see some shadows, those that's not actual black paint, it's just the shadows, but it really, really changed the entire look and feel of the case. Just having that black was just not acceptable. Once I put the top and bottom panels back in and riveted them into the case, the white, one thing I was worried about was the two whites were going to be off. But in fact, the matching of the white was uncanny. In fact, you can almost not even tell that they're different whites. Um, it basically made this build, um, painting it white. And you'll see a little later on what kind of mode I was going for with the all white slash the blue theme as well that we're going to go with. Once I had the panels on, I was able to really take a look at the space that we're going to have to be utilizing. I chose to use a dual bay XSPC res, as well as the client wanted a DVD drive. They actually wanted a Blu-ray drive, but unfortunately that wasn't in the budget. So we're going to be using all three 5.5 inch, 5.25 inch bays at the top, and we're going to be utilizing the lower portion with the rad and the the 140 millimeter fans. Now, originally I wanted to go with a UV blue. I switched that up after I saw a couple of builds online, and I decided to go with Mayhem's Pastel Blueberry. This was also because I really wanted to use a thicker tube. I really liked the look of a thicker tube, so we went with compression fittings that were 1/2 inner diameter and 3/4 outer diameter. Now, again, because there was a budget to this, uh, we weren't able to go with angled fittings. These were the cheapest compression fittings that I could get, and originally I was thinking that I was going to paint them white, but the chrome actually really went with the uh, few parts in the build, such as the 780, um, that actually pulled out the chrome pieces. So right here we can see the XSPC block, the Raystorm, and immediately I knew that I was going to have to paint the shroud around it white because it didn't go with the build, so we had to paint that one as well. Now, one of the things that I don't get about a lot of other builds is the lack of minute attention to detail. So they will go as far as to paint everything, a perfect color scheme, but then they'll leave the graphics card, um, IO shield silver. So everything will be painted perfect, and then you can see this silver IO shield, as well as, screws or other, minute details of the sort. One of the things that I take a lot of pride in is making sure that everything, even an ugly DVD drive, has been painted according to the scheme that we've chosen. I typically would not have a um, optical drive in a case, but since this was one of the very few requirements that this client asked for, um, I felt the need to make it look as good as I could. So here you can see the first coat of paint on the XSPC fitting, and as well it on the IO shield of the graphics card. It really does add a lot to the build, even though it's very small change. It you can tell that the time has been taken to make sure that everything has been painted and is according to the scheme that you were going for. So as much as I hate the optical drive, I ended up trying to make it as good as it can look. Um, the next thing I wanted to do was um, make sure that the fans that I had were the fans that were going to stick out in this build. As you can see here, the white painting on all the components, including the rad, um, really changed the look of everything. Um, Even the optical drive actually doesn't stand out as much. The fans that I decided to use were ones that I had never actually seen before. I really wanted to get a blue blade with blue LEDs, and it really, really stuck out to me that these Cobras were exactly what I was looking for. Now, I've never used these fans before, and they were pretty much, well, the only ones that fit all my criteria. There were certain fans that would be blue with white LEDs, or they would have, a black shroud around them. These had like a smoked acrylic look to the shroud, and the actual blue blades added a lot to the build itself. Blue against white was definitely the absolute theme of this build. So what I was trying to do was let the LEDs in the fans be the amount of blue in the build, and then the rest of the white was going to be lit up by white LEDs. I wasn't going to try and put too much blue in because I've seen a lot of builds that were oversaturated by blue, and it kind of brings a dark look to the build. So as you can see here, these are just a few components that I got that I'm going to paint white, and it's going to change the entire look of the build. Once I had all these components ready to go, it was quite quick to throw them into the case. Um, I was debating originally whether or not to use the graphics cover, the back plate. And only now do I realize how much it actually changes the look of the entire build. This is just a basic EVGA backplate that I colored white, painted it white with 3 coats and then 2 of lacquer, and it really, really stands out. It makes it almost, a focus on the build. The 2 white components, the Raystorm as well as the graphics card, really, really allow the build to pop out and give it that more spacious feel. I'm really happy with how the size of the fittings looks on this block. They're just big enough, but not too big. And the white, like I said, you can see there's an LED that I've mounted, and it's going to shine on top. The blue 140 millimeter fans on the top, I ended up having to switch out. I originally was going to use 2 140 millimeter fans, and as you can see, there's another LED strip at the bottom that I've mounted. But I ended up having to do 2 120 millimeter fans, one on the back, one at the top, and then a 140 millimeter fan at the top. Um, Sorry for the camera shaking here. And you can see there, that's the 140 millimeter fan, and there's a LED strip there as well. So the blue will come outside of the case and the white LEDs will be shining inside the case. So far it's looking fantastic, and I'm really happy with how the white is really coming out. Once I was able to start feeling out the distance between the fans and where the reservoir was going to be, I wanted to make the loops as simple as possible. So I had to end up inverting the um, CPU block so it was as straight as possible. So the inlet would go through right at the bottom, and the outlet would come out through the top. As you can see, the fan configuration, the 140 millimeter fan on the right, and then the 120 millimeter fans fit perfectly. And I wouldn't have been able to put another 140 millimeter fan in there, which is fine because we don't need that much airflow. It's already in excess of the airflow. The graphics card backplate really stands out, and you can't tell, but because I painted the I/O shield of the graphics card, um, it's seamless. It's just all white, and you don't see any silver on the I/O shield of the graphics card, which is exactly what I was going for. Now, because we've optimized so much of the space in this small case, I was actually able to Dremel and fabricate a 140 millimeter fan placement on the bottom. This has actually enough room to have the radiator in the front in push-pull config, as well as that fan pushing air up directly into the graphics card. Now, because we needed to use as much space as possible, there was an actual gap between the uh, optical drive and the top of the case, and I felt that this would be a perfect place to put the SSD. I did not end up going with this configuration based off that I was unable to route the wires in between the fan and the top fan there and the actual optical drive. So I had to find a way of mounting the 2.5 inch SATA drive and the SSD in somewhere that you cannot see them. The only place I was able to mount the um, hard drive, the 2.5 hard drive, was up at the top. So there was a small gap there that I was going to be able to use in order to mount this 2.5 inch hard drive uh, at the top. So basically, I was going to take the hard drive, paint it white, and then use double-sided tape to mount it up to the top of the bracket here. And that way it actually wouldn't be in the way of any tubing. It also wouldn't be in the way of the radiator or any airflow of the case. And because the exit point of the hard drive is out the back, it was very simple to connect it. So you can briefly see here it mounted up at the top, and I gave it a couple of coats of paint, covered the I/O, and made sure that there was nothing going inside the hard drive. It's actually quite inconspicuous in the place that it is, and the lines actually line up perfectly with the bottom of that hard drive, the 5.5-inch bays. So I'm really happy with how that hard drive mounting went, and it saves a lot of space because I wasn't going to be able to mount it out back, as the cable management is already going to be difficult to get the case on. So now that everything is pretty much well mounted, we're able to take a look at the final routing of the tubing, as well as the fluid that I'm going to be using. So here we're going to be filling the loop. I have a nice bottle that I can just squeeze into the reservoir, and I'm going to do my best to fill the loop while filming with one hand and putting in the liquid with the other. Um, I enjoyed using Mayhem's pastel. This is my first time using the pastel blue. Um, One thing I did not do, which you should probably never do, is I didn't do a pre uh, test. So I didn't test the to see if there was any leaks before. The compression fittings that I used were pretty solid. As well as the tubing. There was nothing going to go wrong with the tubing. So even though these are only $5 compression fittings, they uh, really created a tough seal. As I was tightening them, I can feel the solid feel of the compression fittings. Uh, Something happened in this filling of the loop that's never happened to me before. I was able to actually fill the entire loop without having to turn on the power supply. So if I just rocked um, the case back and forth, uh, I was able to actually get the entire um, res, as well as all the tubes, filled perfectly with the Mayhem's pastel. Um, there was no need to turn on and off the pump. You'll see shortly that I was able to actually fill the entire tubes without having to um, cycle the power or do anything. I'm not too sure how or why this was possible, but because the res is actually in line with the CPU, so I'm not too sure how I was able to come over. But either way, it took just under a liter in order to um, fill this loop, and I'll show you in a second. So you can see here that the entire tubes have been filled, and this is actually before I've even turned on the pump. There's a little bit of a bubble up there, but with slight rotation of the case, I was able to actually fill the whole rad and the entire tubes, as well as the majority of the reservoir. It was unnecessary to power cycle anything. I don't know if that's the pastel or if that's just my configuration, but it worked extremely well, and I definitely do not suggest if you're a beginner to turn on the pump without actually testing beforehand. So here's the first time of turning it on, and you'll see that it just pretty much will cycles all the way through. And luckily there was no leaks, so we were able to go right ahead into the cable management and other connections. The one thing that I was hoping I would get a little bit more of with this effect of the thick tubing and the pastel, I was hoping to be able to see the flow of the pastel similar to that of the aura that they sell, Mayhem sells. I do enjoy the look of the aura crystals or the gold flakes or whatever they're called. Um, but the usage of it is impractical and literally it fades within weeks. In a simple loop like this, I was considering it, but they don't work with the XSPC Bay reses, so that right then and there, obviously I wasn't able to use it. Uh, I am pretty happy with the pastel, and as you can see, it still got a few bubbles in it, but I just literally turned it on, so um, it's not too bad. Uh, the color is pretty much what I was looking for. It's giving it an ice blue, and there's still quite a few bubbles, obviously, but I just turned it on. So, um, but overall, with my first usage of Mayhem's Pastel, I used the concentrate. So it made about 750 milliliters of coolant, and I think for this build I probably used about 500 to 600 milliliters. Surprising that the 140 millimeter radiator took up a significant amount, but again, we're using thicker tube, half-inch inner diameter tubes, so that also takes up a lot of. Now that that's done, I'm able to finish up the window mod. I was waiting on the black trim to come in so I can actually put together the um, acrylic, and I used quite a thick acrylic piece here because I had it inset. So one of the things that allowed me to use this thickness was because it was beveled up, and that allowed me to make it flush with the actual panel. So it does come out very, very nice, and you'll see how it accentuates the whole build and allows the light to come out properly. So you can see here that it really opens up the case and really allows the entire internals to be viewed properly. It came out perfectly, exactly the way I wanted it, and slowly case designers are actually starting to make big panels. I know Corsairs had it with their Obsidian series, and now I see NZXT with quite big panels. They're starting to understand that people take pride in their computers, and this allows us to see what we've done inside. So with that part done, we can see the final stages of the build. The cable management was quite um, difficult at the back of this build, as this build was definitely never this case was never meant to have this many components inside of it, as well as powerful. You can see that the white interior and that big window mod really allow us to see exactly what this case could have been if Thermaltake had taken, just a few more minutes to think about its future. I enjoy the look of the case with the computer turned off, and even more so with the computer turned on. Um, the thickness of the coolant doesn't allow the LEDs to come through the front, which I kind of hoped that would happen. However, the front push-pull fan config does give it a nice blue hue. The top fans as well obviously glow. It's not over vibrant, but it definitely glows a nice blue. The internal has three LED strips, and I was thinking that that was a little bit too much white, and I was going to replace one with a blue LED, but after looking at a few builds and contemplating the money to take it out and the time to do it, I really felt as though the white LEDs actually let you see the internals a lot better. Even my cable ties I ended up matching with the blue of the coolant, so it really comes together. As you can see here, unfortunately, the camera doesn't do it justice. It actually really stands out. It's like it comes out exactly the way I wanted it, and Project Glacier is a perfect name for this build. The internals are beautiful, and you can see pretty much well everything that I wanted to accentuate about the case, which is simplicity and um, you know, just basic beauty. Now, I rushed this build log a little bit because I had to get it to the client, as well as I had to announce the winner of the contest. But let me know what you think on the color scheme and the build and the simplicity and the mods. Um, I always enjoy and read every single comment. I try to get back to any comment that's been posted, and uh, I'm really trying to make something of this channel. Maybe do some things that I've never tried before, and those are all going to be witnessed in my Gold Rush build log. So after this is done, I'm going to be starting up on that again and have an update on my Gold Rush build log. So thanks for watching. Rate, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the future.